So, what happens when buyers stop wanting to buy in the Bay Area? Where do they all go? They all eventually turn into renting. And what happens is then you're going to have a lot of competition when it comes to renting. So, we're going to go over one of the articles that came out this week. 12 people compete for every rental unit in Silicon Valley. That is wild. And that's probably where all the competition is at right now when people have stopped looking to buy or they have decided to make some changes. Now, the other thing I want to go over this week, and you're going to see this across a lot of other areas, but also you're going to get kind of these mixed signals when it comes to property taxes and commercial values all across the Bay, because as less people are using commercial spaces, how do you determine the valuation of it? And how does that property tax gets assessed? We're going to talk a little bit about how that's broken down momentarily, but let's go over the headline articles of the week, which is the aspect of renting. Renting in Silicon Valley. There is 12 people. Sorry, this look this froze for a bit. There's 12 people that compete for every rental unit in Silicon Valley, new study says. Rent Cafe placed the U.S. tech capital as the sixth most competitive rental market in the entire country and the most competitive in California. So Rent Cafe is they kind of do this each year. They rank each area score based off of 5 metrics from January through March 2024. Apartment occupancy rate, average total days in an apartment unit was vacant. So the kind of the turnover of these. Prospective renters per vacant unit, renewal lease rate, and the percentage of vacant stock of apartments that were newly built during this period. For comparison, then the national average on if you just kind of have some benchmark, and this is like a C minus, 73.4%, or a C, and the state's average is 72.6%. So where does Silicon Valley range for this? Look at this. With an occupancy rate of 95.1, this leaves very little inventory left for apartment seekers. And you kind of see this. If you take a look out and notice, like if you're looking for a rental or if you've been competing for rental, there is a lot of people that continue to move into the Bay Area. And they move into the Bay Area for their own reasons. One, their first time moving to the Bay for a job. 2, their job may require them to be in the Bay. 3, they want that lifestyle to be in the Bay for work and play opportunities. But if you notice it, most of the things are being built when it comes to products tends to be more apartment complexes for rent, not nearly the same amount when it comes to for resale. And this is this is the case for many reasons. It could be the strategy of those individuals. It could be zoning differences for them. It could be where they feel like, look, condos have not actually appreciated or done that well, but there's a lot of people that are willing to pay these high amounts of rent here in the Bay Area, between $4,000 to $8,000 a month. Let's just keep building products for them. That's a really big and really good return relative to how much it costs for them to do. So you see like these activities continue to happen. But when people stop looking to buy and you still get more people coming in, you get this kind of impact where people would just be competing now for what's left. And they're not competing for what's to buy. They're competing for what's to simply rent. So you can see the average rent in Santa Clara County right now is over $3,000 with an average apartment size of only 892 square feet. And this is because there's been a lot of jobs being added throughout the Bay Area. You can see 7,500 new jobs added in the South Bay since the beginning of the year, even though there was a cut from $40,000 back in the kind of the downturn at that point of 2022 when it came to tech companies. But in general, you still got a lot of activity here. You got a lot of big companies that are still, they may not be aggressively hiring, but they're still having people, they're still bringing in good talent. I see still a lot of activity. Certainly with people that are fortunate to be employed at NVIDIA, those people may quite frankly be eligible to be buying, but they're also, NVIDIA is still hiring a bunch more people. So when you have all these different big companies that are still doing really well, and if you look at the stock performance of these companies, these big tech companies versus the rest of the general stock market, you can see they're completely outperforming them significantly. There was some good stats that were shown of if you remove the top 6 companies from the S&P, the top 6 performers, and you look at like the remaining 493 different companies in the S&P 500, it would have been a negative return already at this point. So it's been absolutely incredible to see how strong these companies have been and how much investors continue to back them because of their scale and because of their opportunities. But quite frankly, outside the Bay Area, there's not too many places that are as competitive as it is here. It looks like the most competitive market, which has been kind of the case for some time, has been Miami. A lot of people have been flocking to Miami all around the world, especially those in South America, but many in the US, including primarily like New York, has flocked there. So they have been one of the most competitive markets out there. So it's just kind of interesting to see, like, you have to kind of think about it, right? Like, these things kind of, they don't balance, but they kind of both go up on their own dime, right? So, like, for example, if you want to buy a place, there'll be less renters in, right, for the amount of units, but then those people will be competing for a home. So that kind of edges that up. But as people kind of give up, they're uncertain, they get laid off, they're still going to rent. So those are all the people that have been competitive into the rental market. And as long as that, but both of them tend to continue to go up over time, right? Very, very rare circumstances, they both happen to drop unless there's like a very big long-term exodus, not like a COVID short-term one, like a long-term complete migration shift. That's kind of the only situation where you see both may potentially go down. But even then, in the Bay Area, like, a lot of people can just own multiple homes, right? So a lot of people, when they buy their first home, they may buy a condo or a townhome, and then they may just rent it out, and they can still, they may or may not be break even depending on how long they've owned it. But at the same time, they may also be okay with it because they are banking on the appreciation will continue to rise. So they may be okay with offsetting some cost, because usually the offset of cost isn't like drastic. Like, maybe you're looking at $15,000, $20,000 a year negative for some of these people that have bought maybe in the last 5 to 7 years. So many are okay to stomach that in exchange for, hey, look, the value of the homes may appreciate by 7-8%, things like that. So either way, you can see there's just still a lot of activity going on when it comes to the rental space. But what does this also mean? When you have this much rent, this much capacity for rent, like there's so much demand for rent, you're going to see a lot more of those continue to be built, and they're going to be nice. And one of the biggest things that are a challenge for a lot of people, especially in the Bay Area, is going from renting to owning. Especially the trick part is the renting units are really new and really nice. And so many times you're not going to be able to find something like that to own for a condo flat. Like, think about it, right? Like, there's a lot of them that have gyms, they have pools, they got some sort of clubhouse, they got nice amenities, they may be in a good location. But they keep building those because they can keep getting that revenue for a lot of employees and a lot of people that live here to pay the kind of amount that they're paying, which, as I mentioned, like $4 to $8 grand in places like Mountain View, Sunnyvale, Santa Clara. But that being said, when you got to own a place, most of the products are going to be a lot older to be at least more affordable. If they're really higher end, so like, for example, if you look at the community at Apex in Santa Clara, that's different. Like, but those condo flats in Santa Clara are already at 1.2, 1.3 plus. And so that's just for a condo flat, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, these types of units. And so you're going to always kind of have this. So unfortunately, a lot of the renters, especially if you're living in a nice place, you might have to sacrifice a little bit, but just remodel, redecorate the interior. At the end of the day, you're the homeowner of the place, and you'll be successful. But I do see why it's very tricky for a lot of people, because they live in this super glamorous new building and they hope to find something similar to that when it comes to owning. But that's not usually the case. Leave in the comments below if you know of any buildings for sale that are that glamorous, not in San Francisco, but let's say outside of San Francisco, that are brand new kind of condos that have the same kind of amenities that these newer rentals have. There is one that has been like kind of in development, and they have a good amount of people moved in. There's one called the Almaden that's in next to like Willow Glen, east part of San Jose, or east part of Willow Glen area, like as far east as it can be. That's how they would label it. So that's an area that you may want to consider because they can have some pretty affordable places there. Now, this one, as I read it, it was like super confusing. So I want to go over this with you and get your thoughts about this. This doesn't make much sense in terms of like all the different things that you're sharing, but let's just kind of go over some of the highlights. So when you read this, South Bay property values suffer slowing growth as real estate flops. Real estate value increases weakest in years for Santa Clara County. All right, well, let's take a look at some of these stats. So when you read that, you probably would have assumed that it was likely residential, but it's kind of a mix, which is why this is like confusing, super confusing. South Bay property values have begun to wobble due to a steadily weakening commercial real estate market in the wake of tech layoffs and an office sector that has floundered. The assessed value for Santa Clara County real estate has increased in the most recent reporting period, but the pace of the rise in value was the slowest in 3 years. Okay, so they increased in value, yet they began to wobble, so that's a little bit strange. The weakening rise in South Bay real estate values could crimp the property tax revenue that flows to municipal. So, okay, let's break this down a little bit of how like these typically work. These typically work when it comes to the value of the home. So, for example, in the Bay Area, if you buy a new place, regardless of whatever the person paid for before, they're going to be reassessed as to whatever you bought it for. So, if the previous owner owned it for like $400,000 and you bought it for $2 million, you'll be paying the property tax off of the $2 million. So, if you think about it, when it comes to any county and any assessors in the state of California, because California all follows a proposition that caps the maximum increase a year of 2% of the property tax. Because of that, it's actually very good when there's turnover, as long as the new value is higher than the previous one. And to be fair, most of the time, it's going to be that way, right? Because unless you bought and even today, unless you bought like in the worst time of like 2022, which is May, you're probably going to be already making money off of your home anytime outside that, even after that or even before that. So anytime that's the case, then that's actually a benefit for a county and their assessor's office, because they'll actually generate way, way, way more money versus the previous amount if it was only at $500,000 as an example. So that's kind of strange about this. So the key about any county is they actually want activity, because generally the new activity will be a refresh over the previous ones. So that's how it works. Or if you think about it, when you buy new construction, those are new ones that then they can then charge property taxes for, right? So that can be huge generation of capital that they didn't have before. So that's something to be mindful of in terms of how it's calculated. So take a look at this. The overall assessed value for property in Santa Clara County was $696 billion for this year, an increase of 5.4% versus last year. This is obviously good news, because these can increase and raise clearly a ton more money when it comes to any sort of government services that these are funding. A big part of it is, quite frankly, some of it is likely just being misused or misallocated. I mean, there's God's amount of money that's being shared here, but there's clearly something going on if things are not improving when there's just so much money. But nevertheless, the difference is this. Commercial real estate property and residential sites produce sharply contrasting performances, because now I don't know exactly how the commercial property side is taxed. There's a lot of breaks that they can have. There's a lot of different things they can do there, because that's a little bit different, where they're like trying to stimulate jobs and kind of local growth. But at the same time, that's where there's going to be a very big impact if something bad happens. Because think about this. A lot of commercial properties are significantly less than it was before. And if they are a percent or is a value relative to what it was, then that's a big problem when it gets resold. Because let's just take an example of your residential home. If your residential home was $2 million and it turns to $1 million and you sold it for the $1 million, well, the property tax adjustment also reflects that new number too. It doesn't go with the old number. So that's the only situation where things are really bad for the county. So a lot of places, like for example, that are already going through these huge haircuts, like San Francisco, mainly San Francisco, but even places like Oakland, when you saw those reports that all of a sudden they're resold for this significantly lower amount, that's a really, really big negative hit when it comes to property taxes for a specific county, right? Because those are also not cheap. Like these are tens of, if not hundreds of millions of dollars at a time of a building or of a tower. So that's really the biggest challenge that these, especially these larger counties or cities will get impacted with, will assess, because of if those actually occur, then there's going to be big hits when it comes to the services and options. And the biggest challenge that you see across the board is when there's a hit, they're not willing to really do anything. Like take a look at some of the crazy stuff that's happening in Oakland right now, and in terms of their budget, right? I mean, think about this. Oakland actually, out of all cities, they charge a lot for taxes. They have a city transfer tax that is there for Oakland take a look at this, and you can kind of compare. Like they have no shortage of tax collection items, but the issue is just complete mismanagement. It's also complete just allocation. I don't know what they're exactly doing, but take a look at this yourself. Here's a guide to closing costs when it comes to Northern California, and you can see like a breakdown. If your city is named here, it would show those are the additional taxes that is being charged for each specific city. So, for example, San Jose, if you have a home over $2 million, this will be split between buyer and seller. That there will be a split $7.50 between the two basically per thousand, on top of the $3.30 that San Jose already has. So that's like an example where San Jose can make a decent amount of money from that. But take a look at the stuff in Oakland, right? So in Oakland, you have if you're between 2 to 5 million, $17.50. So that's quite a bit more. That's another $7 or so per thousand that is applicable for Oakland. And even for the ones that are under 2 million, they already have a $15 per thousand that splits between between the seller and the buyer. So you can see like Alameda County has a lot of cities, evidently, that has this kind of split. So they actually are, quite frankly, generating a significant amount of revenue when it comes to real estate, residential transactions that other cities and other counties aren't even doing. And so that's something just to be mindful of. And they can always increase this, which is certainly a negative. It's certainly negative to when it comes to the real estate market, because then individuals that are buyers can be like, look, should I still buy in Oakland, or should I go buy Berkeley has a pretty high transfer tax, or they can buy in other neighboring cities, or going completely else in a different suburb altogether, right? So these are really, really big things that they actually have that others simply do not have. And the fact that they're still having these kind of troubles and they're kind of factoring these one-off moves is always it's a huge concern, right? And they're not willing to make any pay cuts or things like that. So that's where things can go very bad. When things go up, then they kind of spend more. They do these different services. They kind of waste it all. But when things go down, which is normal, right? Real estate doesn't go up in a straight line forever. Then they have big problems. And then there's like some sort of cuts they have to do and just different things like that. But the biggest thing about this too is also, hopefully a lot of these cities and counties are not factoring future projects, right? The biggest mistake people want to have is, I'm going to completely already allocate my budget, assuming that certain things that are not even done today will occur. So for example, I hope they are not factoring in what Google Village was proposed to be many years ago into the future of their budget, because that will be really, really bad, right? Because a lot of Google's Villages projects has been on hold for a while. They're not going to bring any revenue off of that. And so different things like that is like, hopefully they did not factor all of that in, because then it'll be really bad. Because what if they cancel it altogether, right? I know one of the things in Oakland is they had that huge land, which is the ballpark, right? The Oakland A's ballpark and the Raiders facility in that whole area. So they're still trying to sell that, but that's still ongoing. And like, how many buyers are trying to buy an empty like space like that you can't, like, how much revenue do you have to generate to make that worth it? And they may have a specific like number in their mind, which may not make any sense. So things like that are very, very slow coming. So hopefully they not factor this in, because otherwise the county will be in very big trouble over time, as that does not occur as quickly as they would have hoped. So that gives you a little bit of a glimpse as to what's been going on with the Bay Area real estate market this week. A lot of it is there is a significant slowdown right now, as either buyers are on hold, they're on vacation, or as you can see, they're all just competing for rentals. So if you're looking to go over a game plan to buy, sell, or invest, contact details are below. I may change this to every other week instead. Leave in the comments if you want this every week or every other week or once a month. See you next time. Bye now.